Four teens thought they'd found the perfect target, a quiet old man with a cane and a worn-out hat. They laughed, shoved, and grabbed his things, thinking it was all just harmless fun. But their ignorance led them straight into a truth they never saw coming, a truth that changed everything. Want to know what happened when this old man finally had enough? It was one of those gritty Chicago mornings where the air felt heavier than usual, the kind that clung to your clothes and made everything seem just a bit more exhausting. The bus, packed with its usual mix of tired commuters and restless teenagers, pulled up to a stop in a neighborhood that looked like it had seen better days. Stepping in was Walter Bennett, a 75-year-old man who moved with the kind of steady determination that hinted at a life full of stories. He wore a faded army jacket, its patches barely visible, but still hinting at a proud past. His scuffed boots tapped softly against the floor as he made his way to a seat by the window, gripping his wooden cane like it was more than just support. It was part of him. His hat, marked with the insignia of a Vietnam veteran, sat perfectly on his head. He stared out the window, not really seeing the grimy streets but something far beyond, locked in his own quiet world. The peace didn't last long. Four teenage boys barged into the bus, their laughter bouncing off the walls. They looked like trouble from the get-go, baggy hoodies, cocky smirks, and that untamed energy of youth mixed with just enough recklessness to make everyone else uneasy. Leading the pack was Jaden, a tall, wiry kid whose confidence practically dripped off him. His eyes scanned the bus, searching for something, or someone, to entertain him. And then he saw Walter. "Yo, check out the old guy over there," Jaden said, his voice loud enough for half the bus to hear. "Looks like he walked straight out of history class." His friends roared with laughter, egged on by Jaden's theatrics. The tension in the bus thickened. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably, others buried their faces in their phones or newspapers, pretending not to notice. Nobody said a word. Jaden wasn't done. He swaggered over to Walter, the smirk on his face growing wider with each step. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, leaning just a little too close. "That jacket of yours. What did you do? Dig it out of the trash?" Walter didn't respond. He simply looked at Jaden, his face calm, almost unreadable. This only fueled Jaden's fire. "What, you deaf or something?" Jaden jeered, motioning to his friends. One of them, a shorter kid with a backwards cap, chuckled as he nudged the cane Walter was holding. "Yo, is this your weapon? You gonna fight us off with this thing? Scary stuff, man." The group erupted into laughter, the sound grating and hollow. Walter stayed still, his grip on the cane tightening ever so slightly. His silence seemed to irritate Jaden, who decided it was time to escalate. With a quick swipe, he grabbed the hat off Walter's head and flung it onto the dirty floor of the bus. "There you go, Grandpa. Don't say I never gave you anything," Jaden said, his laughter cutting through the uneasy silence in the bus. Walter leaned down, moving slowly but deliberately, and picked up the hat. As he dusted it off, Jaden shoved him lightly on the shoulder, causing him to stumble back into his seat. That was when a voice from the middle of the bus finally cut through the chaos. "Hey, enough!" It was a young woman, probably in her late 20s, with sharp eyes that didn't shy away from the scene. "Why don't you just leave him alone?" Jaden turned to her, his face twisting into a sneer. "And who asked you? Mind your business, lady." The woman didn't back down, but Jaden had already decided she wasn't worth his time. He turned back to Walter, who had now straightened up, his hat back on his head. For the first time, Walter's gaze locked with Jaden's, steady and unyielding. It wasn't angry or scared, it was something else entirely, something that made Jaden pause for just a split second. The bus rumbled on, the hum of the engine the only sound, as the tension in the air grew heavier. Walter didn't say a word, but his silence spoke volumes. It was the kind of quiet that dared anyone to make the next move. The tension in the bus was so thick you could almost hear it crackle. Jaden and his gang, still grinning like they were the kings of the world, weren't about to let things go. Tony, the shortest but scrappiest of the group, decided it was time to up the ante. He reached out, grabbing at Walter's cane with a smug grin plastered on his face. "Come on, old man, we're just messing around." Tony's voice dripped with fake innocence as he tugged at the cane. But then something unexpected happened. Walter's grip tightened. His knuckles turned white, and he didn't let go. In fact, he barely moved, holding onto that cane like it was a lifeline. For a guy who looked like a stiff breeze could knock him over, Walter had strength that none of them saw coming. "You hear me, boy?" Walter said, his voice steady, sharp, and cutting through the air like a knife. "Leave my things alone." Tony froze for a second, his bravado flickering. Jaden, of course, couldn't let that slide. "What's wrong, Tony? Grandpa too strong for you?" he taunted, leaning against the pole like he didn't have a care in the world. Jaden grabbed a half-empty water bottle from his pocket and smirked. "All right, if you want to play tough, let's see how you like this." With one quick motion, he squeezed the bottle, sending a splash of cold water straight onto Walter's jacket. "Whoa, looks like someone's sweating. You good there, Pops?" Jaden cackled, the rest of the group joining in. The rest of the bus didn't know where to look. A few passengers glanced over nervously, but most kept their heads down, pretending they hadn't seen a thing. The driver stayed focused on the road, completely oblivious. Walter, meanwhile, didn't flinch. He just stood there, quietly brushing off the water. But there was a shift in his expression, something hard, something fierce. Jaden noticed it too. "What's with the look, huh? You mad or something?" "Come on, old man, give us a reaction," he said, practically daring Walter to snap. And then Jaden's eyes landed on something hanging around Walter's neck, a small tarnished medallion glinting faintly under the harsh fluorescent lights of the bus. "Oh, what's this?" Jaden said, reaching out and snatching it up before Walter could react. He held it up, inspecting it like it was some cheap trinket. "What did you do, rob someone's jewelry box? Doesn't look like it's worth much." The bus went dead silent as Walter's hand shot out, faster than anyone expected, and yanked the medallion right out of Jaden's grasp. His movements were quick but controlled, like someone who'd been through more fights than anyone on that bus could imagine. "This," Walter said, his voice low and steady, "isn't a toy, son. It's a memory. A memory of my brothers who didn't make it back home, and I'm not about to let some punk like you disrespect it." Jaden froze for half a second, his cocky smirk faltering as he tried to process what Walter had just said. But then, like a switch flipping, he shrugged it off. "Brothers, huh? So what, they fought for people like me? You can't be serious, old man." "Dead serious," Walter replied, his tone sharper now, like the edge of a blade. Before the tension could snap, the bus jerked to the side, making a sharp turn that threw everyone off balance. Jaden stumbled, grabbing onto a pole to steady himself, while one of his friends lost his footing entirely and hit the floor with a loud thud. The group erupted into laughter at their friend's expense, momentarily distracted from Walter. But Walter didn't waste the opportunity. While they were too busy clowning around, he stepped back, putting just enough distance between himself and Jaden. For the first time, it felt like Walter was the one in control, and the gang just hadn't realized it yet. The bus squealed to a stop at the next station, the hiss of the doors breaking the heavy silence. Walter stood up slowly, steadying himself with his cane. Everyone watched, waiting for him to exit like any other passenger. But instead of stepping off, he turned around, his calm gaze landing squarely on Jaden and his crew. "You boys are young and dumb," Walter said, his voice even but sharp enough to cut through the thick air. "But let me tell you something, being dumb ain't an excuse for being disrespectful." Jaden tried to muster up his usual smirk, but it didn't quite land this time. His friend shifted uncomfortably, their earlier bravado shrinking under Walter's steady stare. Walter reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, worn leather notebook. It looked old, its edges frayed and the cover scratched from years of use. He flipped it open with care, revealing a page of faded photographs. "See these men?" Walter said, holding the notebook up for them to see. The pictures showed a group of young soldiers in weathered uniforms, their faces full of determination and camaraderie. Walter pointed to the smallest figure in the group. "That's me, just a kid back then, like you." The bus was so quiet you could hear the hum of the engine beneath the floorboards. Walter's voice grew firmer. "I was your age when I went to fight for this country. These men, my brothers, we went through hell together, real hell. Not this playground nonsense you think is tough. And you know what? Most of them didn't make it back." Jaden's smirk vanished entirely. His friends exchanged nervous glances, the weight of Walter's words sinking in. One of them, a skinny kid in a hoodie, whispered, Is that true? Walter looked at him, his expression softening for just a moment. Every word, son. Those men gave everything so kids like you could ride these buses without a care in the world. He closed the notebook with a quiet snap and turned to the driver. Next stop, please. The driver nodded, still processing what he just witnessed. Walter stepped off the bus, moving with the same steady dignity he'd carried since he boarded. He didn't look back. The silence he left behind was deafening. Finally, a man who had been sitting quietly at the back of the bus spoke up, his voice ringing out. Hey kid, you just disrespected a hero. Jaden's face went pale. He stared at his hands, the same hands he'd used to grab Walter's medallion, and they suddenly felt heavier than they ever had before. His friends looked like they'd been hit by a truck, their earlier bravado replaced by guilt and unease. As the bus rumbled back to life and pulled away from the stop, the passengers began murmuring, their whispers filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. Jaden slumped into a seat, his usual cocky grin replaced with a blank, almost haunted expression. His friends stayed silent, their laughter long gone. Meanwhile, Walter walked down the sidewalk, his cane tapping softly against the pavement. His face remained calm, but his eyes carried the weight of memories too heavy to share. He didn't need to look back to know he'd left an impact behind. For now, he just kept walking forward. What would you have done in Walter's place? How do you think such situations should be handled? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you or someone you know ever faced anything similar? Let us know, and don't forget to like and share this story if it resonated with you. This story was created to shed light on the important issue of respect and to inspire kindness and understanding in the world. Your opinion matters, and together, we can make a difference. Let's make the world a better place.